finally talk about Marvel's Ant-Man, the highly anticipated movie starring Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, Ant-Man, of course, also starring Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, and Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne. And I'm just going to get started in this and saying Ant-Man was probably one of the best Marvel standalone films that I've seen. And for me, what I liked most about it was the fact that, at least for me, it didn't necessarily feel like it was a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. And what I mean by that is that, like, unlike, not saying like it's a bad thing, but like unlike Captain America: Winter Soldier or let's say Iron Man 3, where they're hammering you over the head with references like to what happened in the Avengers or whatever. Like, obviously, this movie makes tons of references to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and with Falcon and stuff, and that's all stuff I'll get into later. But to me, overall, I like to have its own sense of identity, and it wasn't heavily relying on the fact that it does take place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So having that in mind, I was thoroughly enjoyed by this movie, and for me, I would say it was probably one of the best standalone movies. So I just want to go ahead and talk about the things that I enjoyed. I'm sorry, I'm pulling up my notes here on my phone. The opening scene establishing who Hank Pym is and kind of like the ongoing battle he's going through in the movie. And of course, it was nice seeing Haley Atwell as an older Peggy Carter. And then I think John Slattery is his name, as Howard Stark again, after playing him in Iron Man 2. It's kind of weird not seeing Dominic Cooper, but of course, like, for age reasons, I understand why they didn't use Dominic Cooper. Just they gotta keep with consistency. So for me, that opening scene is set up a lot. Of course, they're building the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters that we saw in Captain America: Winter Soldier. And was, again, just establishing what's going on with Hank Pym and ultimately setting up the plot of the movie with a very short scene, and again, not like a whole lot going on, but enough to establish, okay, like this is our main character, well, one of our main characters, and this is the story more or less throughout the movie. And I really like that setup. So there was that, and I gotta say, like, the CGI on Michael Douglas, he looked really good. Of course, it's a mixture of CGI and makeup, and it really made Michael Douglas look like 1989 Michael Douglas, considering how old he is now. But no, I like that, how that looked. This movie to me starts and ends with Paul Rudd, and Paul Rudd is one of those guys where most times when I see him in a movie, I'm expecting, of course, comedy and all that stuff, but I'm also seeing, at least in my eyes, like, when I see Paul Rudd, I see Paul Rudd. Not necessarily the character he's playing, I'm just like, it's Paul Rudd playing this, Paul Rudd playing that. But in this movie, I felt he actually acted, not that he doesn't act, but he brought a sense of humanity to a character that no one, beyond, like, hardcore comic book readers and other fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not a whole lot of people know who Scott Lang is. And the fact that, like, much like Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy, and very much so with Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man, he brings a bit of himself into the role, but the role doesn't become consumed by Paul Rudd. It is very much Scott Lang, but with bits of Paul Rudd's own personality mixed within the character. And what we get on screen is what I think is a really relatable kind of, just not like, he's, again, just a flawed character, and not this, like, high up on a pedestal like Captain America or Thor, based on their looks, and like, oh, like, they're perfect beings, like, nothing's wrong with them. I'm not like bashing Captain America or Thor. I'm just saying, like, in comparison to, you know, a god and a living legend and all that, we just get a man. Like, we're an Ant-Man. This is about a man, not a god, not a real huge superhero. I mean, obviously not huge, but again, just Paul Rudd brings a real humanity to the character that I found really enjoyable while watching the movie. So there's that. And then, of course, Michael Douglas. I mean, you can't go wrong with Michael Douglas. He brought so much to the character of Hank Pym. And honestly, when I first heard that he was playing Hank Pym, I was really surprised, because as a casual comic book fan. I mean, I haven't read too much into Marvel comics. I mean, I know that Hank Pym was the first Ant-Man, and in the comics, he's actually the one who created Ultron. But what I found interesting was the fact that they're going with a much older Hank Pym, and that there's already a built-in history of Ant-Man that the world doesn't know about, and the fact that he actually became this comic book character in Tales to Astonish, which I think is the actual comic book where Ant-Man and the Avengers debuted in, which I thought was a nice Easter egg. I mean, I could be wrong, but again, like, casual movie fan here, so I'm just don't hate me. But so yeah, I thought the fact that they were bringing in an older version of Hank Pym made it interesting, because then there's a lot more you can go with the character, and if you wanted to, you could bring in the character in, you know, another season of Agent Carter. So again, that's opening more doors, especially with the whole Wasp thing. And segueing into that, Evangeline Lilly, I thought was really enjoyable in this movie. And for the first, I would say, 20-ish minutes of seeing her, I'm like, okay, I mean, she wasn't a bad character or anything. It's just, there wasn't much more than what I was expecting. I mean, from the trailers, I already kind of had an idea of who this character was going to be, and she was that character, so I guess I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't a little more to it. But I would say, like, halfway through the movie, and from that point on, I found myself really enjoying her on screen, and then her chemistry with Paul Rudd, and even though it was pretty predictable that at some point they end up together, or hooking up, whatever. But I like that throughout the movie there's glimpses of that, but it's more of them focusing on the matter at hand, not just like them like trying to kiss or Paul Rudd trying to get with her or whatever. I did enjoy that, and she brought something to the character that because obviously with this being kind of like their own character that they kind of made up for the movie. There's a lot they can do with it. Obviously, like, we all know she's going to end up being Wasp, especially with that or mid-credit scene. I thoroughly enjoyed Evangeline Lilly in this movie. But then, of course, I would probably say one of the people that really stole the movie was Michael Pena as Luis. When I first saw him on screen, I'm like, okay, just another side character or whatever. He was hilarious. I mean, every time he was on screen, like, I was cracking up. The person I was with kept cracking up throughout the entire movie anytime he would even speak. I mean, it was just one of those characters where his comedic timing was so good, and, like, even some jokes that kind of dragged were still funny, even though they were kept going on. Like, at the end, we're here, we're gonna be, Scott's back up. And all the cops are there, back it up. I just thought that was hilarious. And just him and that whole trio of the guys in the movie with T.I. and what's his name, the guy with the Russian accent or whatever. They're obviously playing the comedic parts, the comedic relief. They also bring in like each character kind of has a certain role to play, whether it's T.I. like distracting the cops so Hank doesn't get arrested, or the guy trying to make sure the laser grid's turned off for Scott to get through, or whether it's Michael Pena knocking out the guards and then going back to save the guards when he knows the place is about to blow up. Just little things like that I actually really enjoyed from those guys. What else? Of course, can't talk about this without talking about the whole Falcon scene, which to me I felt was kind of not ruined, but the fact that there were TV spots for the movie that showed the Falcon scene, I felt like that kind of ruined it for some people, even me to a certain extent. I wish I didn't know about that, honestly. I wish I would have gone in not knowing that scene was there, because it would have been a nice surprise to see that. But then, of course, like, I was expecting it, and the whole like Avengers facility thing, and them explaining why Hank Pym hates the Avengers. Like, he doesn't hate, but why he doesn't like the Avengers, doesn't like the idea of giving anything to another Stark, or having to work with S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever. But yeah, the whole Falcon scene, like the whole fight scene, just the action in general in this movie was really great, especially in that Falcon scene. And Anthony Mackie, again, just as he's one of my favorite characters in, like, the Falcon is probably one of my favorite characters in this universe right now, and I'm so happy that he's part of the new Avengers team. And when Lewis is explaining to him the new guy, and like he's going through like that storytelling of like he said, she said, she said this, and then you find out it's like Falcon trying to find out who Scott Lang is, and you're just like, oh shit. But yeah, I thought it was hilarious. This movie is so great on so many different levels. Just the comedy, and I like that it's a heist movie, kind of like it's a subgenre within a genre. It's a comic book movie, but it's also a heist movie, kind of like how Captain America was a comic book movie, but a political thriller. And that's what I felt this movie had that Age of Ultron lacked. Was Age of Ultron was this nonstop action movie, like beat for beat, like every 5 minutes it seemed like there's a big action sequence. Where this is more story and character driven compared to Age of Ultron. So of course this movie isn't perfect, and while I don't have a whole lot of problems with it, my problems kind of start and end with the villain. I think the villain was really lame. The whole Yellow Jacket thing, because you knew going in, the bald guy, not because he was bald, but you know exactly who the bad guy was as soon as he walked in on screen. You knew he was gonna end up fighting Ant-Man. It wasn't that he was surprised, and the actor did okay. I mean, I don't blame his performance, but it's just, I feel like that's where Marvel lacks, is other than Loki or Ultron, their villains aren't exactly the most threatening and the most interesting. I mean, I kind of was okay with Warmonger or Ironmonger in the first Iron Man movie. Whiplash, Mickey Rourke he was weird. I didn't really care for him. I didn't really care for the villain in Iron Man 3. What's his name? Guy Pearce's character, whatever his name is. The Thor villains other than Loki have been lame. I don't know, for the most part, I don't know why Marvel doesn't really care other than Loki and kind of Ultron. They don't really care about their villains, so I guess they don't. I don't know. So in this movie, just the whole Yellow Jacket thing, and I didn't really buy into Darren Cross and Hank Pym's relationship, really, and just, I don't know. I never bought into it, just because this villain was just really weak and not really well written, not interesting at all. I know they're using this movie to bring in the Ant-Man character, but at the same time, every time the villain was on screen and he couldn't put two and two together that Hope was working with Hank Pym, but he could figure out that Scott Lang's working with Hank. It's just, I don't know, I just didn't really care for him. And then another thing that kind of bothered me was the fact that Hank was so hesitant in not telling his daughter the truth, when all it took was her getting mad one time. Then he was like, oh, well, what really happened was we were trying to take down this missile from the Soviet Union, and she kept shrinking to infinity, and then that's how she died. I'm like, you could have told her this decades ago, and you choose to tell her now. I don't know. That's just me being nitpicky. But overall, I loved Ant-Man. Ant-Man was such a pleasant experience. Nice way to wrap up Phase 2 of Marvel, and I'm really looking forward to Civil War, especially with that the end credit scene with Loki. I've been saying Loki too much already. With Winter Soldier and Bucky and Cap. And I guess it's actually a scene from Civil War. It wasn't intended to be a post-credit scene, but I guess it kind of fits in. Oh, and for those of you who may have missed it, there's actually a bit of a Spider-Man reference when that whole end sequence when Falcon trying to figure out who Scott is through Louis telling the story, and talking about there's a guy who swings, a guy who crawls up walls. I don't know if you guys caught that, but I did. But yeah, overall, Ant-Man was a really, really fun movie. Guys, go out and see it. I cannot recommend this movie enough. So guys, that'll be it for me. So until next time, have a good one.